Rebecca, how are you?
Hi, Robert. I'm good.
Good. Glad to hear it. This, I think, is my last official meeting with you guys.
I was gonna ask if this was the last one or not. Oh,
Yeah, technically it is. I told Jocelyn that I would be, willing to come back just as a civilian, so to speak, a citizen, because I'm not sure that you'll have a newly appointed secretary by next meeting. So I'd be willing to even just kind of sit in the meeting and just quietly sit there and type up the meeting minutes next month. But I won't be the city's appointee anymore.
won't be official anymore. Yeah, I'm not sure what the rules are on that. I'll let her handle that.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
we will miss you.
Well, thank you.
And I know that we'll see you around town. So
you'll probably see him at the library a lot more often actually now, because I never felt I had time to read when I was an older person.
I bet.
Just too many other things I had to read, and I just got tired. But now I'm so excited to be able to read for pleasure again.
All right. Well, we can help with that.
Yay. Hello, Mary Beth. Hello, Rose. Hello, Art.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
How are you?
Fantastic. And you?
Great.
I like your hair. Did you
Thanks.
do something different with it? It looks
Just kind of curled it a little bit.
that's cool. My hair always looks the same since I was like 4. Like to figure out something different, but yeah.
So Robert, now that you're out of political life, can you
Sure.
tell us what you really think?
Yes.
All right. Any public comment? I don't see any members of the public, but if anyone on the board wants to do any comment, give a chance. All right. All right, we can start with our approval of minutes from our March meeting.
I'll move approval just for procedural.
Thank you. I'll second it. Any changes that need to be made?
Yeah, thanks for sending them.
Yeah, I realized
that.
it had been almost a month since I sent them, so I wanted to get them fresh in front of
Refresh.
people. Yeah.
In looking at them on my own, I didn't see anything that needed amending or additions. Any discussion or comments from anyone else? Otherwise, we can move to, or we have our motions, we can vote to approve. All right, so we have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All right, and our vendor reports.
All right. Sorry for all the wild sharing. I have a lot of tabs open here, but I think I have them all lined up properly now. So here's February, Rebecca.
All right. Yeah. So we're getting caught up. We were a few months behind. And so now we have February and March. I sent these out earlier. Were there any questions or things to note off the bat? If not, Jocelyn, you can. Oh, did I hear something?
Not just a question from, I mean, you're closer to this than we are, Rebecca. Was there anything that you saw
yeah.
out of the ordinary?
Jocelyn, if you scroll, let me see. Under electronic resources, those were a few payments to SCLS for additional overdrive content. So we see that annually in digital magazines. We pay a little bit extra to get more digital copies of really popular digital materials. So that's nice to offer. Okay, let's see what else. What else did I noticed? Our cross-county border reimbursements came in February. Yeah, right there. So this is payments from bordering counties for their residents' use of our library. And I think on the agenda tonight, you'll actually be looking at those payments for the following year. Is that right, Jocelyn? Are we looking at that tonight?
It is correct. It is payment. It's a 3-year average, and it pays out. You're a year ahead with the documentation.
Yes.
Mhm.
So it really varies widely by county. As you can see, sometimes it's quite low. But that does go into our pie chart of revenue. So you'll see that once a year. So those are there. We paid Oh Yeah Studios under capital outlay with fund balance. Those are for those 2 word murals that will be in the lobby entryway, the welcome mural, and the gather mural that will be downstairs. So we're excited about those coming soon. And I think that was about it to note for February.
Because these are 2 separate months and separate reports, we should probably have a motion and action on each of them.
Move approval.
There's a
Second.
second. Thank you,
Second.
Rose. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, so February is approved, and then we can move on to our March one.
March. Let's see. We had some expenses in fund balance again as part of our process for hiring our new deputy director. We had 2 finalists for that position. We brought in one from out of town. And we had a really great experience interviewing both of them. And we're really excited to be working with Catherine Clark, who will start next week. So there are some expenses related to that process. And then I think at the very end, under next chapter project expenses, we have a larger payment to BSI for new furniture in the building. We have a lot of new seating. We have new furniture in the Archer meeting rooms, new tables, new chairs. So that has been really exciting to finally have that. And once we have more in-person programming and open up that space for the public's use for meetings, it's going to get a lot of use, and people are going to really appreciate some fresh furniture down there. Yeah, Rose.
The new chairs are just super comfortable and the tables are beautiful. It's really beautiful furniture. You guys did a nice job in selecting it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's quite a process working with the designers. And then of course, everything is pretty much custom ordered. And with just shipping as it is right now, the process to get a covered, lounge chair has taken quite a bit of time. So I'm glad that people are appreciating them. Any other questions about March?
Move
I'll make a
approval.
I'm sorry, this is Robert. I'll make a motion to approve the March vendor report.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 All right, thank you, everyone. And looking at our endowment disbursements.
Mhm.
So this is the annual report from the Madison Community Foundation, lining out where the activity for the following year happened within each of the endowments. The Middleton Public Library has 2 of them. This first one is just a regular legacy endowment. if we were to say yes to either the full distribution or partial distribution, we'd be looking at $9,938.98 coming off of this endowment. And then they give a little summary on how the fund performed over the last year. This is also the form that we provide to the Department of Public Instruction, along with the submittal of the signed and approved annual report. And this is also what the auditors use in the city finance department. So I thought I'd throw these forms on the agenda this year because it's been a couple of years that we haven't necessarily talked about the endowment disbursement in an actionable way. This is the large print. If we were to receive the disbursement off of this, it would be just over the 1,300. And here's how that account performed this last year. Typically, these accounts and their distributions have been used for things like one-time projects. So before we endeavored into the next chapter project with a full-scale building remodel, it was used to buy furniture for the teen section, special programs like a one-time event or something like that. Or other things like chairs for the computers. The last couple of years, we have not received this disbursement. Actually, last year we did, but then we ended up sending it back. My recommendation is that this year for 2022, we also forego the disbursement and then let these funds continue to sit in these endowments and grow. But that is, of course, up for discussion and any questions. Are there any questions?
I would like to support your recommendation and also point out that the year ends as of December 31st, and since then, the stock market has lost about 6.5% of its value. So that year-end value of the funds, you can subtract from that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Kristen, I see that you have your hand raised.
Yes, I just had a question. My question is, just with these endowments, I see you had one for like large print and just wondering that one donation that always comes through us for a certain collection and then we give it back to you, is putting it in an endowment instead of just giving it straight back to you, like giving it to you through the endowment. Is that a better option? I was just wanting you to consider that. What's best for you in the future? I hadn't thought about that or to ask before.
If you're talking about the donation that just came in, then no.
Okay.
No.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that in the future, if you weren't going to use it, if that was something you would want us to do. Okay.
Any questions from trustees?
My only question was Art's agreement to the recommendation also a motion?
It wasn't, but I can make it one if you'd like.
That would be awesome.
Okay, I move that we not accept the transfer of funds and that they remain in the respective endowments.
And I second. This is Jean.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? I think that was everyone. Thank you.
I did showing to this too. It was just a smidge late here on the agenda. Rebecca also did update the spreadsheet for us, just so you can see an overall holding of funds that are donation funds held outside of the city. to give you a full scope picture there as to where our both of the endowments are at right now. So obviously, if we forgo that, then that helps to grow that balance back and, like Art said, regain some of that lost investment money.
And this was through the end of February. I don't receive the MCF balances until about mid-month. So that's why you're seeing it through February. But as Art noted, the market has been down. And so we have seen some drops in this, you know, not huge, but it's trending down rather than up. And hopefully, you know, it won't be that way for long, but who knows?
All right, thank you.
Okay, the cross-county authorization.
Okay, so this form will start to look familiar every year. These eligible to request and payable in 2023. In our annual budget that we put together for recommendation for the Finance Committee and City Council, these county balances right here are totaled and listed under intergovernmental revenue. So it shows the money coming in from Dane County, the money coming in from the cross county, and then the general fund transfer. And that makes up the intergovernmental funds for the library. So this isn't a huge amount, but it's also not, you know, we don't need to sneeze at this amount. It's enough that it makes a big difference in our revenue every year. I haven't done a like charted comparison, but just glancing at these, and we can even take a quick look back at the vendor report for February. You can see just kind of in a quick comparison, the numbers are down. Again, it's not a lot of money, so it's not an amount that I'm concerned about, but it's something that I'm definitely keeping an eye on. Typically when, like we don't even have Dodge County listed on here. So there was no use from Dodge County that was enough to generate something out of a formula. That's usually one where we see like, I think 1 year we had like $2. So generally when it's been under $10, we've just circled no to indicate that we'll pass on that because it's not worth the postage that it requires to mail it to us. But anything above $10, we've said yes to in the recent past. Any questions on this form?
No questions. This is Robert Burke. I would make a motion to authorize the acceptance of the cross-county reimbursements.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All
Only-
those in favor-
Only
Oh,
question
go
is
ahead, Robert.
who seconded again? Sorry,
It was me, Cindy.
that's what I thought. Thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. Library use policy, which is also somewhat related to our equity statement. So we started this conversation last month and we realized we wanted further time and conversation. So we're bringing that back this month as well. So looking at our use, I'll let Jocelyn pull that up. I think we had looked at our policy and looking at these as like guidelines for usage of the library. Trying to think of, we had thought about it like through the lens of an equity framework and thinking about the words acceptable and expectations and kind of making sure that what we're communicating is in line with our beliefs. Has anyone given any further thought to this in the last month or looked back at this or had any ideas?
This is Robert. I mean, I don't, I think if we could do something that's more of, definitely, I think it still needs to be a policy to give the library staff probably, clear support maybe. And I know we were kind of going down the path of more of statements or whatever, but I guess I guess I'm not I haven't given a ton of thought. Just the only thought was I want to definitely support whatever we come up with here. I want to make sure that the library team feels like we have their back.
Jocelyn, what thoughts do you have as far as where you feel like we should put more input or anything you think we need to add or change still?
Sure. I really appreciated listening to the discussion from last month because I think that gave a lot of really good context and structure around what is a policy for the library versus what is a statement versus what is a guiding principle and what are the tools that we're using to put those things together. A couple of larger ideas about policies and tools, and then I'll drill it down specifically to this one. I've been noticing that a lot of, especially larger metropolitan area libraries are moving away from this format of policy. They still have policies. Obviously, we need to have rules that help to regulate the governing of the library, and that staff can use to provide day-to-day operations. But the format is a lot more friendly and inviting. And on their websites, if you scroll, it tends to be more of like a fax kind of a thing rather than like 1A, it doesn't read like an ordinance. It reads more like a Q&A. So that's kind of something that I've been keeping my eye on that I think would be a worthy project in the next couple of years. If we were to do something like that, we would really want to look at every single policy. Now is not the right time for that. But what I think it is the right time for is to continue identifying and using things consistently, like the DPI's inclusive toolkit. A few years ago and the before times, the Department of Public Instruction came out with inclusive services guidelines. This is before the summer of 2020, before the pandemic, but it was really a step towards creating a better measure for equity and evaluating equity within the library facility and its governance structure along with its staffing structure. In writing the equity statement that was drafted for us, I know that the group took a look at the GARE stuff. So as a staff, we've been really talking about what are those tools that could really be our go-to. So when we're looking at something as a staff, like appropriate use in the library, we have something to put in front of that policy to look through to make sure that we're not missing any blind spots, that we are indeed breaking down invisible barriers, even if the ones that are invisible to us when they're made, when we're aware of those through something like an equity lens. So I think we're really moving in the right direction. I think if there's no changes, I'm absolutely great with the way the policy is at this point in time. But I think overall, policies are something that we're going to want to continue to look at. It's not just something that sits on the website and doesn't ever get used. We want to keep them fresh and keep staff trained on them and aware of them and useful. The policy previous to this, as it's listed right now on the website, definitely uses words that are not of the same value and tone that we like to take with our customer service in the library. So things like a lot of appropriate, defining what is appropriate, we got really nitpicky about like, you can do this, you can't do that. A lot of you can't do. So in keeping it a little bit broader, just to the larger hitting items, like no smoking, sleeping, weapons, or stealing. That really helps to keep things a little more fluid for staff to be able to respond to. A couple of examples. Say someone is living out of their vehicle and they're parked at the library and they come in and they need to use the restroom and they're using the library, they pop into the restroom, and while they're in there, they're going to brush their teeth because they're living out of their vehicle and finding access to running water isn't that easy. They don't make a mess, they clean up after themselves. They do this for a few weeks. One day someone sees them brushing their teeth, they come and tell the library staff, and we tell them, no, they can't do that because of the policy. Well, for a variety of other reasons like health and hygiene, regular use of the bathroom to brush your teeth is not a great idea. But if it's one person, and in Middleton, we don't have a huge population that's using facilities like this, then we're going to say that's okay. Same with sleeping. Somebody's dozing off. They clearly have all of their earthly possessions with them. If they're sleeping for more than a few, for an extended period of time, we'll probably wake them up. If it happens three or four times within a short period of time, maybe we'll suggest they come back to the library another day. But if they're just sitting there enjoying the quietness and they're having a hard time staying awake, we're not going to jump right on them because there's no sleeping in the library. So little things like that allow for better customer service and for everyone to be able to use the library are just a couple of examples. That was a very long-winded answer.
That was very helpful.
Well, if there's no recommended changes to this, I would make a motion to approve the library use policy as it is here before us today.
I will also point out that a couple of things, it's with policies, it's always hard to know where do you cap it and keep it specific, and where do you cross-reference things within other policies. There are other things that relate specifically to privacy or gifts in libraries. So again, the use of the library is really related to an overall approach to services. And we don't get super into it because some of these other things are even mentioned in other ones.
Any other questions? I know Robert did the first motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. And then our equity statement. So different than a policy, more of our statement, we had kind of talked about the the composition of the statement, but also thinking about where this might live, and then how might we continue to use this as something that guides our work.
Sorry, I accidentally closed this. So I have to go back in and open it real quick.
No worries. I do that all the time. I love that I can have a window open and I hear a chorus of birds out there. It's just lovely. My cats enjoy it too.
All right. Feel free to keep discussing. Sorry, this is like buried in my Google Drive or something, and I'm looking for it in my email now.
That's okay. Jean and team that worked on it, is there anything you want to say or bring back to our like top of our mind for us?
This is
Or
Jean.
something that you were like wanting to make sure we really looked for or focused on?
Yeah, this is Jean. I think one of the things, again, that we talked about last month was making this a statement. And I think there was agreement about that. Jocelyn, I wanted to ask you, the inclusive services and assessment and guide, is that the guide that you were talking about
Yep.
just a few minutes ago?
Yep, sure is.
Okay, so we reference that here as well, and I think it's really well done. And then one of the other things that came up last month was in that third section, we called it additional resources. I think that was really just sort of, these were things that we collected and talked about, whether that, somebody mentioned maybe that section should be implementation rather than additional resources. One of the things I did want to point out, and we talked about this as well, is that the Madison Public Library, and we include the link down there, I think has a nice way of kind of showing resources and collections that are related to, you know, racial equity resources. And if you just scroll down a little bit, there are these, like, here's our, you know, here are resources in these areas. So that was just one thing I wanted to mention. And I thought that this was kind of a nice implementation.
Any other questions, comments, or feedback? Art?
Yeah, one of my questions from last time relates, if you can scroll up to number Roman numeral 2. So the inclusive services assessment and guide, there is about 20 to 30 pages of questions on that that supposed to fill in answers to. And I guess my question was, so if that is going to provide a framework, what does that mean? Is somebody going to go through and answer all those questions? And who will do that? And then what happens after that? I don't understand how that will be used. It's a good thing, but it's very extensive and very detailed, and I certainly have no idea how to answer all those questions. So
Sure.
how will it be used, or where do we go with that? Is my question, I guess.
Yep, the meat of it. I like the actionable question, Art. Thank you. So some of that has yet to be determined, but what I envision as the intent of something like this, this statement from the board would be, let's look at it from like the life cycle of a policy. So the appropriate behavior in the library comes up as a policy that as identified that it needs to be looked at. It's been a while since it's been used. It's been a while because there hasn't been a lot of people in the building. It's been a while. We have new staff, we have a new mindset, we have a new approach to customer service. The policy is no longer serving the library as it once did. So staff takes a look at this, makes some recommendations for change after looking at the inclusive services assessment guide. So they would go to that tool, look through the appropriate sections, and those this assessment guide is broken down into checklists and questions for just about every area of the library and service and organization you can think of. So let's take signage, for example. Are people not appropriately using the library, yes or no, because of the signage? Like maybe something says something and we think it means something as library staff, but really to somebody else or to someone who doesn't speak English or read English, it doesn't mean that same thing. So it's more to shed light on things that we have been doing for a very long time that could possibly be changed. Another one could be the collection. We look at our collection development policy. As it's been a few years since we've looked at this, let's take a look and make sure that we're still using this policy the way that it was intended and that the policy is serving the library. So let's look through this inclusive services and assessment guide to see what are some of those checklists and questions that could apply to collection development and a collection policy. And then staff would use those tools to make a recommendation to me, and then I would then in turn take that to the board, and then we could do the same thing all together. So those are the types of sort of like flow chart of how something like this could come into action. I think we could also do this for a variety of different, more serious challenges in situations that come our way. Does someone want to use the meeting room for a group reservation that may consider themselves a hate group online? Does someone who's been suspended because they have stolen something from the library want to appeal their suspension and come to the library board? How could we use these tools to review their situation? So some of it has yet to be determined, but I think some really hard and fast ones could be established fairly quickly once we start to look at this as a new way of working. And that's what this is a new way of thinking and working around library services, and how do we create the policy and structure and framework to support that.
Could you do me a favor?
Mm-hmm.
You click on that link and show the board the kinds of what that questionnaire looks like.
Sure.
As I read through it, it's sort of a checklist. Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? But it doesn't give any recommendations to follow up. So it starts on page 10. And it goes to page 20. Yeah, I think it's 29 pages of questions and a checklist. So yeah.
So I believe it was I think it was 2018. The library board, and Cindy and Mary Beth, and maybe Robert, you might remember this. We went through the this governance section to look at where, where is the library board hitting some of these answers. And even if there aren't necessarily, oh, we need to change this, or this is one thing that we definitely need to do, just continuing to have these types of questions at the top of our mindset is doing equity work. So,
It assumes that that I'm not to be pejorative, but it assumes that the people who are answering the question have the insight to recognize their own shortcomings, which is a little bit of a, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but I have some concerns about it, but again, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but it's very cumbersome, it seems. And if you think we're doing fine, you'd answer all the questions yes. You say, well, we have nothing to do.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's probably not going to occur in our situation, hopefully. But then it doesn't. So you say yes or no, and then okay, then you've got to go from there. And that, I guess, it doesn't flow from what I read on the statement, what happens after that either. And that was my other concern that I expressed before. And I don't want to take up a lot of time. I'm not saying don't do it. I just want to highlight those concerns.
Yeah, I think those are all, how does this actually work is what I'm hearing you're really asking, Art. And I think some of that has kind of yet to be figured out.
Okay.
But another small example is who are we asking these questions to, and how. So when we did the survey for the strategic plan, a lot of those questions were based off of this toolkit. So we're not just asking library staff or the trustees, we're asking the general public. So that's like one example of how can we see what we don't see if we can't see it. But yeah, those
Okay.
are all good things to keep in mind, and thank you. Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
Jean?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what both of you have been saying, is that I see this as sort of a springboard for thoughtful discussion. I don't see it as an end in and of itself. I just see it as a starting point, and a whole bunch of people who are involved with public library leadership developed these questions because they know a lot more about how public libraries should look and run and be than most of us do. And so I guess I see that as, okay, these experts came together, developed this this questionnaire that covers these different areas of public library services, collections, staffing, and these are questions that we need to ask not only internally but externally sometimes. And the other thing is, I wonder if in that second section, this sort of gets into the area of, again, what's the board's job and what's the staff job, and they're different. So I wonder if that second section should really be, library staff will, consult this guide and use it as a starting point, and then blah, 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 involve the board when where appropriate or something like that.
Mhm. I think both would be great. Mhm.
Any other thoughts from anyone else? So our next steps with this, Jocelyn,
Mhm.
since it's a statement and not a policy,
Mhm.
is it something that do you want approval on it? And then would we maybe bring it back again, just at meetings to remind us I'm trying to think of like, then how do we make this something that we operationalize?
Mhm. Yep, I think I would love to talk to staff about that. A couple of key staff in particular that have been doing some equity work. I think that, this is not necessarily in response to a specific incident or situation. I don't think it necessarily requires something like a press release. But I think it would be nice to have posted on our website somewhere. So I'd love to take this to the staff to discuss how, this, when we look at GEAR has their 3-step framework, is how they simplified the big, huge topic of equity. And it's helpful to look at it in those 3 steps because it's first normalizing, then operationalizing, organizing and operationalizing. And so I look at this right here as the fact that we've talked about this several times in meetings. We have looked at some of these resources. We're coming back to it. It's an expectation that when we do things like look at policy or evaluating services or putting out a survey, that we're using some sort of guide, that's a huge step in normalizing. And so I think that this is in and of itself is a really great first step. And it's okay not to know exactly the details moving forward.
Art, do you have is that a new hand raise? I couldn't tell if it was from before or
So,
not.
I guess if this is a statement and not a policy, shouldn't we remove the word policy in the header?
Mhm.
Yep, and I think we did talk about that last time. And I think Mary Beth mentioned that right at the beginning here. Just the formatting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thanks for pointing that out. I missed that in the header.
I have my
Cindy?
hand up. Can you see it? On the same line of thinking, this looks to me like like our policy statements look. So I'm just wondering if we want to take out those things that make it look like that and just make it a narrative statement.
Yes, I can clean up the formatting. Mhm.
Any other feedback? I think this has been very helpful. Jocelyn, do you want us to take an action on this for adoption? Since
I
it's a
think-
statement, and I wasn't sure what you wanted.
Yeah, I think action would be great. And that also, for reciprocity, just puts it in the minutes. And I think that that's always a good thing too. So I think action on this would be great. And it doesn't have to stay word for word the same way. This is a work in progress and a tool that we can continue to come back to and use. And as we look to switch over the slate of officers with Jean as incoming president, we can talk about how do we want to use this tool in our meetings moving forward. So more to come. Mhm.
So let me try to make an attempt at a a motion. This is Robert. I would make a motion to conceptually approve the library board equity statement with, with formatting and changes to be kind of reviewed by library staff. Is that kind of an acceptable motion, or Jocelyn? Is
I
that
think, yep, I
kinda
think
what
that
you're
works. Yep. Mhm.
Should the question to the motion, should the changes come back to the board for final approval? Then if it's not in final form now, I guess that's a point of order.
It's a good question.
President's prerogative.
Well, maybe I'll clarify. I think my understanding was it was really more the formatting that Jocelyn was going to change, like taking out the Roman numerals and that word in the title, unless there was a different change that I missed. So from a formatting perspective, I don't know that it would need to come back because we're not changing the substance.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to make it a narrative statement as opposed to the way it's written in different paragraphs.
Well, if you take those things out, it will look more like a narrative statement, I think. I think that's
Okay.
that's all I intended in what I said.
Okay, that's fine. I withdraw my point of order.
No, great clarification. Okay, so Robert made,
Let me read it.
you
I'm
made a
typing-
motion.
Typing it up as I speak, but Robert made a motion to conceptually approve the equity statement with changes to the title and format to be carried out by library staff.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Our first statement.
Yay.
Now someone official. All right, committee updates. Building and development on hold for now. No real new movement or action needed there. Personnel committee, we are at the point of Jocelyn's annual review. And as the Board of Trustees, we evaluate Jocelyn typically, and feel free to chime in, Jocelyn, if I'm misstating anything. Jocelyn will do a self-review, engage in conversation with the personnel committee for some feedback and goal setting, and then we'll bring that back at the May meeting and move into closed session for final approval. I'll also ask if there's any feedback from trustees. The personnel committee historically has been the president, president-elect, and past president. And then I'll also ask if there's any feedback from the rest of the trustees as well. Anything I'm missing, Jocelyn, since
Yeah, no,
it's weird, right? It's one of those things where it's like you do it annually and then you're like, what did we do last year? It shouldn't have felt like it was that long ago, but it feels like it was 5 years ago instead of 1 year ago.
Yep, no, that's right. So the May meeting will end in closed session. Which will be nice and easy to do in person.
All right, so I will follow up with the rest of the trustees too on if there's any specific feedback that you'd like us to include. Highlight all the great work that you're doing, Jocelyn. Updates, City Council, Robert.
Yeah, well,
It was a busy week last week.
yeah, I'm retiring. So I honestly, the biggest thing is I'm retiring. Mike Davis, the city administrator, is retiring in May, but we do have a new city administrator coming online, I think like May 2nd or something. He's coming in, there's like 4 days of overlap. between Brian Gadow, the new city administrator, and Mike Davis, the retiring city administrator. So a lot of changes going on right now. There's 3 alderpersons out of 8 leaving their roles. And I just learned today that our tourism the head of tourism has announced her retirement. So the city next year's, there's going to be a lot of new faces, a lot of new learning curves, right, for people, because some of the history is leaving the city. So I would just recommend to help your city out wherever you can, because there's going to be a few growing pains, I think, over the next year. But it's also a time for new ideas to come to the whole city, because there are some new voices now. So that's exciting too. That's all I really have for my update.
Robert,
What was it? There might be one other thing, but I can't think of it right now. Questions?
Robert, I was going to ask if you could talk a little bit about the bus tour.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
also, if there's any update on the Madison Metro with their survey info, we have had that information available to the public at the library for the last couple of weeks.
Sure. Well, I'll start off with the Middleton bus tour. This is something that traditionally has been done every year to kind of give new politicians and citizen volunteers a chance to kind of understand what's going on in the city. This is scheduled for April 23rd, which is a Saturday, April 23rd, not this Saturday, but the following Saturday. Starts at 8 o'clock sharp out in front of the library. There's going to be a double-decker bus this year to take people around and kind of just see kind of the areas that are kind of being worked on this year as various different projects within the city. And it's a great chance to get up to speed with what's going on with the city. So that's what's going on with a bus tour. I don't know if that's, so then I can also talk about what's happening with the Madison Metro system. But are there any questions on the upcoming bus tour of the city, which, they are offering, I think there's still a number of seats available, and they're offering for anybody on any city committee to kind of participate if they want to learn more. So if you're interested, please let me know, and I will work with city staff to get your name added to the bus tour.
I would just say, if you've never been on it and you're interested in what's going on in the city, it's great. I've done it several times, and I'm actually going to do it one last time because I got an invitation before my term on the library board ran out. So
nice.
It's a great opportunity to drive around and see what's going on. So if you're at all interested, I would suggest you do it.
And I think it's almost 4 hours. I think it goes like 8 to 11 or 8 to 11:30. And then it can go longer if for people who want to stay. They have a little orientation program at City Hall after the bus gets back to City Hall, to kind of go through things like the ethics policy and how to do open meetings law, or follow open meetings laws and things of that nature. So it's a great thing for newly appointed members to citizen committees, but it's also a great refresher for to stay around for that orientation program as well. But the bus tour is more fun and shows you a lot of what's going on in the city, which is, as Cindy said, it's a great opportunity. So I'll give you my best knowledge of what's going on with city bus service, and if anybody else has details to fill in, I'll take them. Our city bus service is really the city of Madison's bus service. It's Madison Metro. And they are moving toward a new system that embraces what's called bus rapid transit, which is still buses, but tries to make it a little bit more like a regularly running train. So the reason a lot of times buses don't get used as much is because it's really hard to figure out when you catch a bus, and the bus schedule changes at different times of day, and there's long gaps where maybe you just can't catch a bus. And they're trying to make it so that to increase ridership, the goal would be to have a regularly running bus service that hits many key areas of Madison, but also makes it out to Middleton. The goal is to have this bus service run every half hour, but I think by the time it gets to Middleton, it may be more of a half hour to the outskirts of Middleton, and then we have to figure out what to do with Middleton. And the goal there, we haven't figured out where the money comes from yet, but the goal there is for Middleton to basically start its own bus system for just like a circulator route that would serve two really major purposes. One, it would allow us here in the city of Middleton to kind of gather up and on one bus that goes around Middleton and gets us to this one location in Middleton where the Madison bus rapid transit will arrive, because really Madison's going to stop servicing Middleton for the majority of their service is going to disappear. So we have to have our own internal system. The benefit of us having our own internal system is if we have a circulator route or something along those lines, it's not just delivering people to the Madison Metro bus system. Now it's delivering people from one place in Middleton to another place in Middleton, including getting people to and from the library, which would be awesome. The trick is, how does this all get paid for? It's in the early stages of being figured out. So I think it's a net positive. It's one of those things where it's a challenge and it's going to cost money, and nobody likes to have to create something like this from whole cloth. But the benefit is we get to create something from whole cloth and make sure that it fits the needs of our city. So I think it's a really good problem to have. It's just going to take some time to figure out how to tackle that problem and make it work for Middleton. And that's all I have on that topic, but I see Teresa, you have your hand up.
Yes, I actually went to the Middleton Public Transit Circulator Committee meeting yesterday.
Great.
I didn't get it on the agenda because it was yesterday. And got a little bit different message. So this is interesting. So you're going to get maybe two sides to a story.
Please.
Because there was someone from Madison Metro there who was saying, no, we're going to keep running to Middleton. What they're doing is kind of combining routes. So I'm a bus rider. So if you're a bus rider, they're combining 70, 71, and 78. So it will kind of go, well, it goes up University to Century to Parmenter, and then sort of down Deming. So not the outside of all of Middleton, but sort of around a big chunk of it. That would be one line that would run. What they're saying is every half hour. But then what happens is the middle of that section gets nothing. And so there's talk now of this tier system. So we are officially part of the Madison Metro. What we could do is kind of move out of Madison Metro and become our own city in the system, the transportation system. This is my understanding. So Robert, please interrupt me if you think I'm not getting any of this right. If we were to do that, we would automatically get more money. There's more funding to us to kind of pull away. They would still keep that route. They're calling it Route F. They would add an additional Route Y. that kind of slices right through the middle of that. And goes up a little further. So I'm up in Orchid Heights. It comes up through Orchid Heights. So the Route 72, if you know the buses, would be basically Route Y. And if they could get enough money, that would run every half hour, but only during peak ridership times. So when we met yesterday, the question was, do we try to find funding to do our own circulator? They talked about sort of like along the lines of the trolley that goes around, but the trolley has very specific places it's going, very specific hours, but like that model of something that could go to a lot of different places. I will be honest, yesterday's meeting, it did not look like that was going to be happening. Yesterday's meeting, it sort of was said, and there were lots of representatives from lots of different places. Like, well, let's wait and see how this new system goes first before we try to figure out the funding. So that's the report from that committee. Robert, I feel like that probably really disappointed you to hear that, but.
No. I don't disagree with anything you said. I will say that I was more hopeful that we would start working on the next Middleton specific bus system now, because honestly, I think we're a big enough city now that we need this ourselves, and we need our own control over where buses go within the city of Middleton. But nothing you said actually surprises me. And at the end of the day, you know, like I said, it's going to be a fairly new common council. So it's they'll have their own chance to put their stamp on what this will look like and where they want to prioritize the funds that we have in the city, and you know, everything could change in a month as to, you know, where priorities lie. So we'll see where it goes, but I'm still hopeful that we'll quickly see where there are gaps in coverage, and hopefully quickly work to find solutions to those gaps, because I know for a fact that there's a bus that goes very, very close to my house and picks up a few of my neighbors to go into downtown every day. And that bus, I think, is one of the ones that isn't going to be there anymore. So they'll have to find a different place to catch the bus into Madison. But yeah, I agree with everything you said, Teresa.
Thanks for being on that committee, Teresa.
All right, Art, any updates from the Friends?
Sure. The Friends had their board meeting on April 4th. And the treasurer reported that they have available funds of approximately $82,000, which is very nice. They had some discussion about fundraising events for the coming 6 to 12 months. They are also working on updating their bylaws and separating out from the bylaws, having a Friends handbook and updating both the bylaws and the handbook to get things that really aren't bylaws out of the bylaws and have it as a separate entity. And finally, they will be looking at opportunities to provide funding for some library events for this year. And Kristen and Jocelyn were also at that meeting, if they have anything to add, or if there are any questions.
I would just add that we also have a general meeting scheduled for Monday, May 16th. Sorry, I have a visitor at 7 p.m.
Thanks, Art. Thanks, Kristen. Updates from the school district, similar to Robert's theme of change and retirements and onboarding and new people coming in with the city. We're having the same experience with the school district. I think I mentioned a meeting or two ago about some hiring that's going on. So we've hired a new assistant superintendent for business and operations who We'll be replacing Lori Ames, who's retiring. We've posted for an assistant superintendent for teaching and learning. And we're in the process of hiring 2 new elementary principals. Monica Schomer has retired, and so we're right in the middle of that process for hiring. We have 2 finalists, and we're just starting the process of hiring for Sunset Ridge. Maria Dislin is been selected to be the principal at One City Schools, one of the charter schools in Madison. So lots of hiring for our leadership team. And we're also in the process of hiring a director of technology. That was the other one I almost forgot. So lots of exciting opportunities for growth and change, and to bring some new people into the school district. And it's always cool to have them bring in new ideas. So just a busy hiring season, and then getting ready as we are in the midst of state testing right now, finishing that up, and then starting to prepare for summer programming. So that's the update from the school district. Any questions? Anything community related or community updates? And anything from equity, diversity, or inclusion efforts? I know we had discussed our statement earlier in the agenda, which was one of the products of that team. Any other updates?
I have nothing else at this time, but I'm wondering if Rose had been going to the Middleton Equity Connection, I think the group is called. And I'm just curious about if you're still with that group, Rose, or if that's something that maybe we should think about picking up after you're done as trustee, or your thoughts on that?
I am still going to those meetings, though they did not happen well, if they did happen, I think the first meeting I was in Montana, and the next one was canceled because of the forum for the city council, no, for the school board candidates. And so the MEC meeting, the Middleton Equity Committee, was canceled, and another one is tomorrow night. And I can send the information to anyone who's interested in maybe being on that committee. I think it's a worthwhile committee right now. They're working on, again, our overall policy statement and our goals. And so it would be a nice time for a new person from the board to join in. And so, yeah.
Thank you.
What would be your suggested connection or touch point, Rose, if one of the trustees would like to be involved moving forward? Should they work through you, or is there a point of contact for the team you're on?
I can give you the point of contact, and right now the meetings have all been Zoom meetings. I don't know how much longer that will last, but I think that pretty soon people will start meeting in person again. So I can send whoever's interested the information for how to connect with tomorrow night's meeting.
Thanks, Rose. Jocelyn, time for your update.
Okay, I will keep the review of the report very short because I have a couple other things that I'd like to share. March was a busy, long month with lots of action. We had some of our outreach efforts expand, which was really exciting. Amanda is pictured right here teaching at Middleton Glen. She's the one that does the majority of our technology instruction at the library and does a great job. And this was really popular, and they've already asked if they can have her back multiple times this year. So that was a big success that will continue. We surprisingly had 45 high schoolers show up to take free diagnostic ACT testing. This was a partnership with Galen Education and the school district, and something that was the first time that we've tried something like this. So there's a lot of kids out there who appreciate having some practice at the ACT before they take it. As of right now, the library is not included in the staffing referendum. This was discussed at last Tuesday's council meeting. And the majority of the staffing requests at this point are focused on emergency responders. However, there was some discussion right at the end of that agenda item indicating that that could perhaps go in a different direction. So this will be one of the major tasks that the new alders take up. And I can't remember if you mentioned, Robert, that this is the first time that the city council has been female dominated.
I didn't mention that. We basically my whole 5-year term, it was split 50-50, but you are absolutely correct. It will now be 5 women alderpersons to 3 male alderpersons.
And so this will be something that the council really gets into in the next couple of months, because the fall will be here very quickly and referendum preparation should be happening like yesterday. So as of right now, the library is not included in that. We of course have different funding parameters and a bit different approach towards our intergovernmental funding resources, whereas some of the other city departments rely solely on the general fund. The kicker for the library is that in order for us to be open on Sundays, and we were hoping for Sundays year round, we do need additional staff. We also need additional staff to help support library mobile services. Amy and I have been working on a service plan where you have a second meeting with the city garage guys coming up in early May to look and discuss vehicle options. But in order to really execute a service plan to make the most of a new vehicle like that, we really need to look at adding an additional staff person. So there's some things related to staffing that we'll be talking about again once we get into the budget cycle in July and August.
Can I ask you a quick question about that, Jocelyn? We used to have Sunday hours, not in the summer. So I'm assuming you have the same amount of staff you had then. You've just allocated them differently and found that to be more useful.
Yes and no. We've had the same amount of staff and we've had the same budget. So in order to keep paying the staff that we have, we've reallocated some of those resources. And then we've also looked at the reclassifications that all incurred some costs. And then what really kicks it every year is COLA. So in order to keep up with those COLA increases, we really need to increase our operating budget every year. And that's been very minimal the last 4 years, really. We haven't had much of an increase the last 4 years. So even if we were still operating like we were in the before times and looking at Sundays seasonally, we either would have had positions that we wouldn't have been rehired for, or we'd be looking at budget cuts in other areas. It's just a weird mix of situations with the library having been closed, which was the perfect time to reorganize. And we are at, I think I mentioned it down here, we just finally hit 18,000 people. And there is an extra number in that. I bet it's that 0. Just over 18,000 people visited the facility in March, whereas we were averaging over 30,000 people previous to the closure every month. So we're just barely halfway over what our previous door capacity was. And until we rebound higher from that, I don't think that being open on Sundays is a good use of limited resources.
Thank you.
But we should still be planning for it. The new meeting room furniture is working out great. We will be reopening the meeting rooms in May with a new overhauled process and procedure for staff and for the public to make reservations. You'll see that in next month's report. And March spring break programming is back. So we offered 82 programs in the month of March with over 1,400 people. It is great to see people continuing to come to weekly programs like story time and really continue to enjoy special things as they're offered. We're still continuing to do so as responsibly as we can, encouraging masks, they are not required. And then we're also looking at continuing that format for all ages programming where we can stagger things throughout the day, maybe with an age group focus at one time of the day or another, but really trying to maximize the staff that we have in the building, the setup that we've got, and the open window for more multi-generational attendance. We had some really great feedback from patrons this last month. I hope you had a chance to read through some of these testimonials, really heartwarming. And then our big news, more staffing changes. Our teen librarian, Kelsey Hudson, resigned so she can focus on her family. And we are welcoming Catherine Clark as our new deputy. So Katie Ganser was promoted to the head of the youth services department. And she has the extremely rare and thrilling opportunity to hire her entire department. We went to from 6 people in youth services, we are down to 1 person, which is Katie, who is holding it together really strong with lots of support from adult services and other departments. We'll be hiring for the teen librarian first, and then the youth services librarian, and then a part-time library assistant, which will then bring the department up to full staff. 2 of those part-time position, well, one part-time position was eliminated and absorbed elsewhere. The other one has remained vacant, and one of them was reorganized into the library services department. So we're still feeling really confident about the structure for the department. We'll just need to fill those positions. Catherine's first day is the 18th. Super excited to have her on board. We have a big list of things that we're ready to have her tackle right from the beginning. So she will most likely be coming to at least 1 or 2 this year yet library board meetings. And then as we get going, we'll set expectations around participation in library board meetings and representation on other committees and involvement with the city. So really looking forward to that. Any questions on anything here before I just share a couple of quick highlights from a recent conference? All right, hearing none and seeing no hands. I wanted to put this together in a little bit better presentation, but this is just a quick copy and paste. You can feel free to read this as I kind of talk through it a little bit. And I'll share this out just in this Word document afterwards. Rebecca and Liz and I had the opportunity to attend the biannual Public Library Association conference that's hosted through the American Library Association in Portland, Oregon this year. It was a much different conference than years prior because part of it was hybrid. So some sessions were happening virtual while others were in person. And this is usually a conference that has upwards of 17 to 20,000 people in attendance, and it was much, much smaller this year. There was a heavy focus on EDI and intellectual freedom topics throughout this conference. And these are just a couple of the highlights that I wanted to share. And then I'll link those to some things that we have going on in Middleton that are good for you to know about. So Liz attended a couple of sessions that she really enjoyed from some library systems in South Carolina that have been working on equity work in a more systemic way for quite a long time. The first one was Let's Talk Race, how a conversation challenged a library and changed a community by the
Hey, Jocelyn, sorry to interrupt. Are you thinking you're sharing a screen right now? Because I'm still seeing the.
Thank you.
You're sorry to interrupt.
Nope, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this was Liz. Let's Talk Race, and then also leveraging staff talent to create your strategic vision. Also by Southern Library in Charleston County. The thing that really stood out for Liz about the Let's Talk About Race was their team, which discusses race, bias, inclusivity, and equity for library staff and community leaders. So we've been talking a lot and doing a lot of training over the last year or so internally, focusing on how can we strengthen ourselves as individuals and an organization in order to support and strengthen these efforts in the community. And so that's sort of the crossroads where we're finding ourselves right now in terms of how do we support equity services, group meetings, things like that, programs with the public based on some of the things that we have learned. And then how do we use things like the DPI toolkit in terms of evaluating those services, those programs, and continuing to operationalize and change systems. So big topics, and it sounded like Richland really had some of this dialed in terms of their tools for support and really good examples. The leveraging staff talent to create your strategic vision. Her last sentence here says, we've been talking about this in Middleton, and it was great to see some examples of how a mentorship program could work. With our reorg, we now have a much clearer path for advancement within the organization. And previously we had page one, page two, library assistant 1, 2, and 3. And the distinction between a page 1 and a page 2 in terms of compensation wasn't a lot. But in terms of what a page 2 and a library assistant did in terms of their tasks and responsibilities, was practically the same, but there was a big pay discrepancy. So it was very unclear as to how do you move forward within the organization, and how does one go from entering in an entry-level page position to become a librarian, or how do they become the director? And so now that we have our organizational chart really hammered out very clearly, we can start to work on some of these employment advancement opportunities and create training and structure around what do those opportunities look like, who is awarded those opportunities and privileges, how do we base that and tie that to exceptional performance. All of these are organizational structures and tools that don't exist right now. So we are really creating something brand new that can really help to support all employees, especially those that want to advance in the organization. We've also, just as a side note, had over the last 6 months or so, more diversity and more hiring happening in our page staff, which is our entry-level position, than we have in the last 5 years. So that's really encouraging, and we want to be able to keep employees satisfied and moving forward with their careers, especially if they want to stay with the city of Middleton. Rebecca, since you're here, would you like to talk a little bit about your session involved?
Sure. So I wrote about just one session that was sort of a highlight for me, and actually Jocelyn was at the session to. I think like First Amendment, freedom to read, all sort of the intellectual freedom and challenges that are happening in libraries right now was another theme of the conference that we saw a lot of talk about. So this session that I wrote about here was called The First Amendment, a Library Puzzle. And this was given by Claire Membilia, who is a library law consultant at the University of Michigan. So she has kind of a rare background in that she is a law librarian, but does a lot of work in consulting with public libraries who are facing challenges in lots of different areas. And so she's kind of this rare expert on this. This focused on First Amendment issues in public libraries, and she used a lot of case law to talk about themes such as right to library access, the public library as a limited public forum and what that means, First Amendment issues around age restrictions, meeting room use, the right to read, obscenity, and collection development. And she kind of did this, she had a map of a library basically, and asked people in the audience to select a space. So maybe it's the youth services area, and then talked about First Amendment issues that might affect that space. She didn't even get to all the spaces in the library. There's so much to talk about. But I think what was really helpful about this session was that we left with a really good resource list. And, you know, just this idea that there are people who consult on this for public libraries was something I wasn't aware of. And I think everyone in public libraries right now is thinking about challenges and is thinking about kind of what the legal framework is around a lot of the things we do and how we would respond to different challenges. So I think just having this as a resource in our back pocket is really helpful.
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Robert.
Just real quick, I know one of the things that was sent to us was a couple of really scary articles about book banning, and was that tied at all with this session?
We will be coming back. We will be coming back
Okay.
to that in just a moment. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
then I will wait.
That's a great question, Robert. And I think that's kind of the most fresh on all of our minds right now because it is so in the news. And when I went to the session, I think that's what I thought it would mostly be about. And actually, that was only a small portion of what she talked about. Things like who gets to use your meeting rooms and how you offer that space fairly to everyone. And also just like a legal framework in terms of how other case law outside of libraries affects libraries as a public institution and who uses them and how. That background was really interesting because it's not always things that are happening in libraries that lead to how we need to respond as libraries, if that makes sense. So just kind of some fascinating history there and something I would love to read more about and know about.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would say also in general, just a note about this conference. The last time this conference was held was the end of February in 2020, and this was in Nashville. And when we attended that conference, if you can think back to all of our mindsets in late February of 2020, none of us knew what was ahead just a few weeks later. And that was a really robust conference. The hot topic was the 2020 census and how public libraries were going to be helping the public with that. And then sure enough, a week or two later, the pandemic hit and you know, our worlds were turned upside down and everything that we thought was sort of the future for libraries and the focus of what we were talking about at that conference kind of turned on its head. So it was really, really an interesting and rewarding experience to get to go to the same conference 2 years later and see a lot of the same folks that we saw 2 years ago and kind of check in and see how we've all been, how libraries have responded. Of course, the pandemic has been central to every public library's lives for the past 2 years. So hopefully it was kind of a full circle experience with that and that we're at the tail end of what the past 2 years has been. But really, just really fascinating to connect with people outside of this area and kind of hear all the stories and realize that we all, you know, did what we had to do to make it through the past couple of years.
Thanks. One of the sessions that stood out to me besides the First Amendment one was building a better board. This meeting or this session was done by a couple library directors from the East Coast, and they did a really great job of breaking down their structure for onboarding new trustees, their meetings and retreats. A lot of just really nice logistical things that I think we could really benefit from in Middleton. A couple things that I had started at one point and then just let go of with the pandemic, like an assessment tool for trustees, like a self and then a board assessment tool. A couple things that really stood out about this was that as a library director, she spends about 50% of her time with the board, either working on projects specifically with the board, training, assessment, and a lot of public engagement. They use a 3-step acronym called GEM, G-E-M, which stands for Governance Effectiveness Model. And it focuses on people, politics, and practices. And underneath that practices is where they had a lot of really great resources on how to evaluate and assess and measure board engagement and activity. So I have a lot of ideas to run by Jean and Mary Beth at some point, some smaller things and some big things that I think we could work on over the next few years. But one thing in moving forward that I thought was interesting that we should probably look at for this year is, in addition to our regular business meetings like this, an annual retreat on the schedule every year, and then 3 to 4 continuing education events that are specifically geared towards trustees that happen outside of this meeting. So more on that to come. Just touching real quick back on intellectual freedom, equal access, the right to read, censorship. On our library's website, under policies, we have a collection development policy. And hopefully everybody had a chance to read those articles that I sent to you from the State Journal and Library Journal. I felt like when I saw, I've been seeing a lot of this happening across the country. 2 of my previous employers, actually, in Montana and Colorado, have made national news. One of them was featured in the presentation that we went to for how messy it has gotten and how egregious some of the actions have been towards censorship. And so I felt like this was just a good time to review and take a moment to look at our own policy in terms of how we would handle a challenge. So a challenge in public libraries is defined as something someone wants removed from the library. It can be for a variety of different reasons, but for whatever, for their purposes, they believe that it should either be moved or removed from the collection. So this can apply to physical items, digital items, artwork that's on display, anything that is in the library, owned by the library, or managed or operated by the library. So our collection policy is quite robust, actually. We have a purpose statement that really looks to balance the limitations of budget and space. This is something that we're really coming up against right now because we've outgrew the building about a decade ago. So balancing the space that people need in order to sit and gather and the space that's needed for collections that are on shelves that take up square footage is a big challenge. I won't spend a ton of time going through this because you can read this at your leisure in more in depth, but we include some factors affecting collection development. Like our system, Madison Central is our designated resource library for our system.
Jocelyn, are you trying to share something again? I'm sorry.
Gosh, thank you. Oh, thank you so much for stopping me. I'll just keep going. Okay. So off of midlibrary.org, library info policies, collection development. A couple of the biggest pieces of this policy is selection of library materials and criteria for evaluation, and then the weeding of materials. We have trained library staff that are overseen by 2 department heads, soon to be a deputy director, that oversee the streamlining and strategy for purchasing materials. So most library materials in the library, especially books and audio, and video, will come through the library based on purchase recommendations and journal reviews. So we use a variety of journals like Library Journal, Kirkus, New York Times, Booklist, all the big hitters to help select library materials. These are things that are pre-published, that haven't come out yet, that we can get on lists for, which is one of the reasons why when something is newly released, oftentimes the library can have it circulating and available to people within that short period of publication time. And then the weeding of materials. This is something that happens on a regular and ongoing basis. We run a variety of different types of reports. We keep things based on a variety of different criteria, all of which are kind of lined out in this policy. And then at the very end, we have a reconsideration of library materials form. So if someone were to come up to a library staff member and they would say, oh my gosh, I can't believe this book is in the library's collection. It has to be removed. It's totally inappropriate. Staff would direct them. First of all, they would say, thank you for using your library. And then they would, listen to what that person had to say and offer the best customer service, because sometimes that person just wants to be heard. That they wanted to take it further, then they have an actionable course to do so through this form. So this form would come to me, they would fill this out. I would take a look at it. I would put together a group of staff that are familiar with our policy. We would look at this together. We would make a recommendation. And then if this person who was making the challenge wanted to do so, they could take it all the way to the library board. So in theory, and at other libraries, I've had this happen before, there's an agenda item on the board meeting that would say reconsideration of library materials. And then that person would be given, of course, time during public comment, and then the library board would review their submission of the form along with staff's review of whatever that material was, and then ultimately it would be a board decision. So anything that is removed from the library, we report to the American Library Association as a censorship. And then that's where the banned books lists come from. So I think that it's similar in school libraries, perhaps a bit different procedure and reporting, but those banned books are banned because people have believed and taken action that they don't belong in the library and should be removed. So this is the course of action that we would take if something like that were to happen. One of the things that's very alarming in regards to intellectual freedom and censorship that's happening now is the very focused effort to an organized effort to ban certain types of books that truly affect groups of people in a way that they haven't before. So here's where I'll stop, because I could talk about this all day, and it's the number one reason I became a librarian, is because no one's going to tell me what I can and cannot read. And take any questions. Any thoughts on that article from the State Journal or Library Journal, or our very brief overview of what we would do should someone exercise that right? Go ahead, Jean.
Yeah, just, I mean, the articles that you sent, of course, are very chilling for us. And I guess I have one comment and I guess a question. I think it was yesterday or the day before in the New York Times, there was I think it's the top 10 banned books right now. And it was another really well-written article. And as you suggested, all of them have to do with race or sexual identity and those topics. And the numbers are just pretty staggering right now. And I guess my question is, I can share that, I can send that article to everyone. But my question is, what are you seeing? Are you seeing anything right now at Middleton Public Library?
So throughout the last year, since we reopened, I was expecting some comment, and and also all perspectives are always welcomed. So we always want to hear and appreciate everyone sharing an opinion. It's when it's targeted to actually cause harm or create a lack of access or prohibit access to materials that somebody else might find helpful is when it really becomes a problem. And when that happens in an organized way, where there's groups of people that are making those efforts, that's where I think we're starting to see a bit different type of challenge than we have in the past. That has not been the case here in Middleton. But I like to be prepared for things like that. And so sharing this and having this discussion is part of an effort in towards that. I've had comments the last year about, you need to take all of those gay books off of display. That's totally inappropriate. I don't want my kids looking at those. We have had a couple of comments about mature content in kids materials. That has traditionally been, since I've been a librarian since 2005, has been the most common. A lot of times that can just be solved with a conversation about reading interests and thanking the caregiver for being interested in what their kid's reading in the first place. I have not, since I've been in Middleton, had anyone fill out this form or turn it in. But I will say that in my former libraries, it's so startling that they've gone through multiple directors that won't stay. The last statement from my previous director, who took a job in Buffalo, New York, said very openly that he was looking forward to working in a community where the right to read and the freedom of expression were not under threat. And when we're challenging books in a systematic way like that, it definitely levels up the need to have strong policies and procedures to respond with.
And I'll also say just anecdotally that, as Jocelyn has mentioned, that the comments about appropriateness of certain books in certain collections or for certain ages is something that I think we see more frequently. I would say maybe in the last month, we had someone who had a suggestion about a certain book for a kid, and should it be in the children's section or should it be in the teen section? And we referred that patron to this form as the next step. And as far as I know, they didn't fill out the form and take it to the next step. But that is not unheard of, and something, at least in my time here over the last 11 years, I can think of a few instances that I've been aware of where that kind of comment and concern has come up.
Mhm.
Yep.
Jocelyn, oh, go ahead. I had a comment, but go ahead, Rebecca. Sorry.
Oh no, it looks like Art had his hand up, so I was
Thank you.
what he
I guess I just have a question.
Mhm.
So if a book is in a library, nobody's forcing anybody to read it. What's the basis of their objection? They simply don't have to look at it.
That is correct. That is the easiest answer. The basis, especially with things like Lawn Boy, which is an LGBTQIA protagonist who goes through some interesting life challenges to how to raise an anti-racist baby. It's based on values of that individual. And those values having such strong conviction that they feel like need to be adhered to community-wide. So you can imagine how difficult it would be to be a library director who identifies as queer, who has a same-sex spouse, and your library board or community members are not supportive of materials that represent you, and are even more so organizing around the removal of those items from the library that you oversee. So, I think the one thing that is common ground with any kind of challenged argument is that books create ideas, and ideas are powerful. And when we look at removing books that support ideas that you may not agree with, we're really getting into anti-democratic behavior and territory that governing boards need to be prepared to address. So if a situation like that were to come up, we would absolutely have a meeting about it. I would work with the president on how to run the meeting. We're very well prepared and poised for something like that. But it's happening often enough and in such stark, alarming, chilling news that I thought it was worth taking a moment to really just have a little discussion and just to start thinking about how would the library board respond to something like that. The question of, well, have you thought about just not reading that or just not checking it out is ironically obvious.
Mm-hmm. I can't see everybody, sorry. So I actually had a comment on that. Art, I am of the same mind, especially as I was reading some of these articles. I only saw one or two in the New York Times recently. But I feel like there's a flip preparation bubble that I think I see a lot of these examples falling into, not every example, the ones that are like the whole community, but I think the problem with this is, as Jocelyn says, just, as Art says, just don't read it. And Jocelyn's like, just put it down. I think especially with kids, books are not as clear as like movies where they like have a rating or an age level. I know they do, but it's more hidden. And I guess my question was, I myself didn't fall into this trap in like a censorship way, but I gave my daughter a kid's book, Princess Academy. She was a little young and it was a little scary. My 10-year-old was like, Mom, that's a little scary for her. And after the fact, I was like, Lori, is there a list for ages so I don't give my 6-year-old this scary book? Not that it's a bad book. I just remembered loving it personally. And so I guess my question is how I feel like there's a middle ground where, especially for parents, if they're informed and know where to like look on age appropriateness or even content so that like they can make those choices for themselves before they just hand their kid a book. Is that something you guys are kind of working on? I just know that like even I read a lot, wasn't exactly sure where to look for the exact, I can see reading levels, but for an advanced kid, like, is it too scary, whatever. I know there's a lot of bigger issues than that. Do you guys have that to like inform maybe parents more as a preventative measure so they're not like surprised by what's in books? I feel like that's a good, happy medium to maybe try to prevent these kind of situations.
Yeah, that is the job of a children's librarian. So just answering questions on the floor. There's reading lists. We have resources like Novelist online that actually line out different reading levels and age groups. And any kind of juvenile fiction, there isn't necessarily going to be like on, board games appropriate for ages 2 to 5. Because maybe there's a 10-year-old who really needs to read that book. It's really about being interested in what your child is selecting and reviewing and participating and engaging with whatever they are. And maybe you find that one thing that's a little bit over their maturity level. And so then that's kind of where your baseline goes from. Well, we tried that and that was a little too much. So that looks like a nice selection. Let's come back to that in a year or two. And having that conversation. We also have services like Librarian's Choice, which can get dialed in real hard and real specific with a specialty curated list for you. So yeah. Any other questions from trustees? All right, well, I will let that lay, think about it. And we can revisit that at any point in time. But as you start to see news articles like that Jean mentioned in the New York Times, and as a trustee in your governance role, know that we have solid policy and procedure to be able to handle something like that. And we, it never hurts to, if we were to get into an actual reconsideration procedure, possibly reach out to the school district to see if the material that's being challenged is also in the school district and take a united front wherever we could on the right to read. Thanks.
Thanks, Jocelyn. Did you have anything else or any other new business?
No, I have that was it. I'll stop there. I have no new business, but I'll just always leave that on the agenda in case anyone wants to bring something up for next month or later this year.
Anything from anyone else, any other trustees for next month or upcoming?
Just a question, since everything is opening and we're seeing a slight increase in case numbers again, and Philadelphia's had, and I think New York was going to reinstitute some mask procedures. I'd like to get together in person in May, but if the situation changes, I assume that you all will be monitoring that. If we need to change back to Zoom, that would occur.
Yeah, I would say that I think, our plan is we had tentatively set the 10th. I think at this point, unless others feel strongly, I think we can try that out and meet in person. Of course, if things were to drastically change between now and then, we can, dare I say, pivot to Zoom. But I think, there's enough space in there too for us to spread out. People can mask if they're more comfortable, certainly. Rose, I see your hand raised.
I just wanted to say thank you to all of the trustees who came together to help with our last minute appreciation of the staff. I mean, it was really great how everybody came together on that, and a special thank you to all of you who contributed to it. And I think it was well received by the staff.
Yeah, thank you too. That was such a surprise to all of us and really, really wonderful. So I pass on thanks from staff.
That's why we did it at the last minute, just to be a surprise to you.
It was, I will let you know that there were a lot of text messages floating around. There's pizza today. So I came into work knowing that, and that was very exciting.
Very cool.
And I heard that you enjoyed the donuts.
I enjoyed too many donuts, yes.
So our next meeting then is the 10th. We're going to aim to meet in person in the community room at the library. Rose, Robert, and Cindy, I would love to invite you at the beginning of the meeting to join us for some recognition in person and thanking you for your time on serving as a trustee on the board, if you would love to join us. And anything all else before we adjourn?
No, but thank you all. I hope to see you all next month too, but thank you all for a great 5 years. I really appreciate it.
I would also say thank you. It's been a great 3 years for me. So thank you it's been great to meet and know all of you.
I'm not going to say anything. I plan to be there in person next month.
I hope to be too.
Yes,
Perfect.
I hope you all can come. Wonderful. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll
Second.
second. Oh, got it.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. See you next month.
Thank
In
you.
person.
Thank you. Good night,
Not just their
everybody.
faces.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Aye.
Bye.